I'm Nelle.
We are Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and today, Nelle, we are going to discuss your radical opinion on Vladimir Nabokov's cult classic, Lolita.
I don't know, it's radical. I don't want to read it.
You don't want to read it?
No.
Okay. So, and the first thing we got to say is, it's not because you're a prude. It's not because...
I'm scared of nudity, no.
Yeah. You're not... Like, you read My Dark Vanessa, which is essentially a very similar subject matter. Like...
Anyway,
Yeah.
Why should I read it, I guess, is my first question. Like,
Okay.
There's this big assumption that somehow, like, I don't see how this is really any different from me saying I'm done with Dickens.
Okay. See, well, the first thing that's different between that is you've read Dickens and you didn't like it. So just a background for everybody, I have read Lolita and Nelle has not.
No.
So you have read Dickens and you have decided you don't like Dickens and he's not an author for you. You've not read Nabokov.
Yeah, and I'm actually not saying that I won't read Nabokov either. I'm just saying I'm not interested in Lolita.
Secondly, the writing in Lolita is just so nice. It's so pretty. It's some of the nicest writing that I've ever read.
I mean, I don't doubt that it's lovely, but there's plenty of opportunities for lovely writing.
Yeah.
And that's not a huge... I'm not feeling the FOMO.
So lovely writing is not enough to sway you. Is really what you're saying.
And, I mean, like, realistically, lovely writing is one of the things I love about reading, but there's a lot of examples of lovely writing out there. I'm not concerned that I'm never going to read anything as lovely.
Okay. Pardon me. This is...
Pardon.
This is such a cult work. It's a very big classic. I mean, you've got to give it a shot because everybody...
I mean, I don't have to do anything.
Well, no, you don't.
I could just sit around and read Dan Brown for the rest of my life if I wanted to.
And that would make you very happy, I'm sure.
But I don't want to, and I don't think that this is an essential read, so it's not on my list.
This was probably the first book to discuss an adult-to-child relationship. Certainly the first to go into detail of it and to allow the reader to say that might be wrong, or...
I don't think being the first at anything is a reason to read it, and we've often said on this channel that just because you're the first, it actually often means that you're not the best example of something.
Exactly, that is... No, I 100% agree with that.
I know you do.
But Nabokov is actually an incredibly good writer. And
yeah, I can see how that would be important to some people, but it's not important to me.
So none of these reasons, which, I mean, look, let's face it, normally you don't need much of an excuse to read a book.
No. And like, if there was no counterpoint, then I would be quite suggestible to read a book that was, well written and well thought of.
So none of the reasons that I'm going to throw at you with, it's just a really good book. Because essentially, the argument that I'm going to give to you, essentially is going to boil down to, it's a really good book. Right? And you're going to go, whatever, to it.
Well, and I am, because ultimately that's not enough to get me over the line. A lot of people who don't want to read Lolita don't cope with, I guess, sexual subject matter at all, or even discussion of pedophilia at all, and for me that's not really where the major disinterest lies. It's the fact that it's from the perspective of the perpetrator that makes it not interesting to me.
Right. Now, I know that pedophilia is a topic that you don't like to read about, really.
I don't think it's anyone's, like... I don't think anyone's like, yay, the book about pedophilia today! I don't think that's anyone's reaction. It is a topic I learned a bit about on an academic sort of level, and...
Nabokov or pedophilia?
Pedophilia. And so I do have a little bit of an understanding of the machinations of pedophilia and a lot of the, I guess, a lot of the lessons being taught with this sort of blow-by-blow description of how a child is groomed by an adult is not new information to me. It's not learning. And I guess that might be interesting, useful part. I mean, like, it's an important part of the conversation if you don't have knowledge of how, especially if you've got kids, it's important to learn how predators approach children and make these things seem acceptable to the children. But I that's not a reason for me either, because I already sort of have an understanding. I just am not interested in hearing why some dirty perv wants to put his penis in a child. Like, that's really what it comes down to.
One of the things that Nabokov does, it's really makes you uncomfortable, really, is that he allows you to forget Lowe's age and allows you to almost form the delusion that this is normal, and then he crushes you back to reality by...
Yeah, it's not an illusion that I think is going to work on me, and I think that whole dance that Nabokov does is directed at a different kind of reader.
I suspect it may be directed at men.
Yeah, I mean, yes, or perhaps even just people who are attracted to women, because I'm not attracted to women, so, raunchy woman description isn't a distraction to me. I'm just sitting there questioning why you're describing a child in a raunchy fashion.
It's things like the smell and stuff. Like, it's stuff that I suspect that you could... I suspect that your sexuality wouldn't matter
too much. Yeah, okay.
It's not like the shape of her leg. It's like the smell of her and stuff. Yeah. But you're going to argue that anything from the view of Humbert...
It's not information that I'm interested in. Like, ultimately, even if it is new information to me, it's not information that I'm interested in. It's not a perspective I'm interested in. I'm not interested in empathizing with pedophiles.
Are you interested in understanding them more at all?
I think it's important that as a society we stop turning them into monsters and allow them some kind of way to seek help before they offend.
Yeah, to differentiate between a pedophile who has committed a crime and a pedophile who has not and would like to reform and seek help, yes.
Yeah, but I also think that we're in a society that sexualizes children. Like, we are in a society that thought it was acceptable for Britney Spears to be a sex object when she was a child. And she is one of a, generation upon generation of examples of girls who are sexualized for the profit of the media industry. And of course, there are people whose, maybe people who have proclivities in that direction, it's normalized for them. And if we're going to have a serious discussion about how to get, how to stop child sexual abuse, it's not going to start with empathizing with the penis in the situation. It's going to start with talking about how we represent and sexualize girls.
Yeah.
And disempower them.
So, the difference between Lolita, which you won't read, and My Dark Vanessa, which you will read,
which you have
read, is that Vanessa is written from the point of view of Vanessa, while Lolita is not written from the point of view of Lolita, it's written from the point of view of Humbert.
Yes, but not just that, but like it's clearly intentionally written so that it presents Humbert's perspective as reasonable and possible and just a line to cross and within reach of most people. It's not...
I think Nabokov writes it without judgment in that.
Yeah.
Which is how writers should write most of their characters. But he writes it without judgment. He allows his arguments to be there, but he also allows the opposite arguments to be...
Yeah, and that's not the conversation I have any intention on being a part of.
Yeah, okay. Does the other difference between Vanessa and Lolita is that in Vanessa she is 16, in Lolita she is 13.
I think that is a huge difference. In Vanessa, and it makes me significantly more uncomfortable that Lolita is so young. She is very clearly a child without agency. Whereas in My Dark Vanessa, she's 15. She's still only a baby, but it's I don't know, a level of disgust, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that is in Lolita that is not in Vanessa is the level of delusion that Humbert is able to inflict upon himself.
I think you get a good view of that through Vanessa repeating Strain's justifications, and you get a really good view of his own neuroses that don't matter to Vanessa, but that he makes her repeat so that he feels like he hasn't crossed that imaginary line.
Yeah.
And I think that is enough of a conversation of that for me personally. I think, if you're potentially a pedophile who hasn't offended, then maybe seeing the inside of another pedophile's head is a valuable experience to identify that this is, this is weird and this is not normal behaviour, but does it just add to the media that is normalising that? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's...
If you are a pedophile and you're watching this, did reading Lolita change your... No. That was a terrible joke. I think that that people can justify whatever they want if they want it enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that anybody who is...
Yeah, like, people murder people and torture people and keep people in underground basements. And, like...
One of the pleasures about meeting people in the bookish world is that they're open to listening to other experiences and stuff, and they're open to having their minds changed. And I don't think that somebody who is going to commit these crimes is necessarily open to those things. I think that they might be interested in reading it for justification.
I think that's a really...
It's a generalisation.
I think that's
a
really
generalisations. They're often
naive point of view. But if you look at the statistics on how many kids are getting abused before they turn 18, then there's a lot of people out there who are making this justification to themselves.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are offending in this way.
Do you think that works like Lolita are doing the same thing that is happening to female pop stars and, you know, the latest...
I don't think I can definitively comment on a work that I haven't read, but I certainly think that works like My Dark Vanessa contribute more to the conversation as far as prevention and identification and disclosure and even how society has built up all of these mini justifications so no one has to take responsibility when it does happen. I think that is a pretty good example of how we need to be talking about it.
Yeah. The other thing is, Lolita was written 50 years ago. Vanessa was written last year.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that Lolita is irrelevant to the conversation. I think part of what you've got to accept is when it comes to distasteful or uncomfortable topics, everyone has, their energy limit that they can put in it. For me, pedophilia is particularly uncomfortable, and there's only so many books about it that I can really.
And you've read your one this year.
I mean, to be honest, I probably read my one this decade. Unless there's another one that really comes across as being revolutionary, I can't see a reason to read another one. But who knows?
Yeah. So, ultimately, for all of the reasons that I can give you to read Lolita, you're never changing your mind, are you?
No, I really don't think I will. I guess one of the things for me, this is not about censorship. This is about energy. This is about where I choose to put my effort and where I choose to. I choose my reading to be an endeavor of empathy, and I don't really want to empathize with people who abuse people. I'd rather focus on reading diversely and empathize with people who aren't hurting people. But is this sort of a form of censorship, creating a little echo chamber? Like, is this something that cuts you off from a part of the world? I guess to a certain extent, but everyone has their own.
The word echo chamber is a very dirty word.
It is the moment, but to be honest, if my echo chamber is full of bloody sunbeams and happiness, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, that was my point. Like, I think that it's... I don't see what's wrong with living in an echo chamber. We all do it a little bit, once you know who you are, why do you need to be, my echo chamber is telling me that racists are bad. Why do I need to listen
to the other side of the argument?
Saying, no, actually, eugenics, no.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I guess for me, that's really what, I'm not reading the pro-eugenics book. I'm not reading the sympathetic to pedophiles book. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And I think we're so captivated with showing both sides of the story at the moment. We often forget that one side of the story is wrong.
Yeah.
So
I don't forget that.
I mean,
but
I think the media does. You can't give equal sides.
Yeah, equal time to fact and non-fact.
It actually creates a false perception that something like a climate change denier is a reasonable position when they're a batshit position and they should be ignored.
Yeah, or helped to understand.
yes, or educated.
Yeah.
And the same with the pro-eugenics, and the same with all the other ridiculous...
Yeah, the same with the guys who are campaigning to reduce the age of consent to 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
libertarians.
Yeah. It's not a great joke.
It's not a great joke, no. Especially if we've got libertarians following us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess questions for you guys is there a subject that you don't like reading about? Is there a book that you're like, I'm not reading that because I'm not interested in the point of view of the protagonist?
Yeah.
Don't try and convince me to read Lolita because it's... I mean, you can if you like.
It's futile.
It's very much futile.
Trust me, I've spent years. Yeah. And I don't think it's wrong that you don't want to read about this. I don't think...
No, but I do think it is interesting to see where everyone's limitations are and where... Like, I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's interesting, or should we stop talking?
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think we'll wrap it up there, shall we?
Yeah.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you're already subscribed, please don't unsubscribe. And let us know what you think in the comments.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.